My name is Emily. I am 34 years old, and until recently, I believed my life was simple and safe. I lived with my husband Henry, in a small house on a quiet street. We were not rich, but we were comfortable. Our mornings were calm. Our evenings were predictable. We cooked dinner together, watched television, and talked about small things. I thought this was what happiness looked like. But for many months, something inside me felt wrong. I was always tired. Not the kind of tired that comes after a long day, but a deep, heavy exhaustion that followed me everywhere. Waking up felt like climbing out of water. My arms felt weak. My head often hurt. Sometimes I sat on the edge of the bed in the morning, staring at the floor, wondering why my body felt older than it should. Henry noticed before I did. He would watch me closely, his eyes filled with concern. "Emily, this isn't normal," he said one evening. "You're not yourself." I tried to laugh it off. I told him it was just work stress. I worked at a big company, and things were busy. "I just need more rest," I said. But Henry didn't let it go. He was kind, attentive, almost protective. He insisted we see a doctor. He searched online, asked friends, and finally found someone he trusted. "Dr. Milton is the best," he said. A friend recommended him. On the day of the appointment, Henry took time off work to come with me. He held my hand in the car and kept repeating, "Everything will be okay." Dr. Milton's office did not feel like a normal clinic. It felt expensive, clean, perfect. The furniture looked new. The walls were spotless. Nothing was out of place. Dr. Milton himself was tall and serious. He asked many questions. How long had I felt tired? Did I feel pain? Did I sleep well? He checked my heart, my blood pressure, my reflexes. Henry sat beside me, listening to every word, looking more worried than I felt. After about 20 minutes, Dr. Milton leaned back in his chair. "Mrs. Henry," he said with a small smile, "I have good news. There is nothing wrong with you. You are perfectly healthy." I felt relief rush through me. Healthy. The word sounded like freedom. "Just stress," he explained. "You need rest. Maybe a vacation." I smiled at Henry. He smiled back, though something about his smile felt tight. But I ignored it. I was too happy to question anything. As we stood to leave, Henry said, "Emily, wait here for a moment. I need to ask the doctor something." I sat in the waiting area. That was when I saw it. The door to Dr. Milton's office was slightly open. I watched as Henry reached into his coat and handed the doctor a thick white envelope. Dr. Milton took it quickly and hid it in his desk drawer. No words. No receipt. Just silence. And suddenly, my relief disappeared. The drive home felt strangely quiet, even though Henry talked the entire way. His voice was light, almost cheerful, as if a heavy problem had already been solved. He spoke about vacations, about how relieved he was, about how lucky we were that the doctor said I was healthy. I listened, but my mind stayed in the waiting room, fixed on one image I could not forget, the white envelope in Henry's hand. When we stopped at a red light, I finally spoke. "Henry, why did you give the doctor that envelope?" His smile disappeared so fast it felt rehearsed. "What envelope?" he asked too quickly. "I saw you," I said calmly. "You went back into his office. You gave him a white envelope. It looked full." He sighed, as if I had asked something annoying instead of frightening. "Emily, you're worrying too much," he said. "Dr. Milton is a friend of a colleague. He's having some financial trouble. I was just helping him out. It was a private loan." A loan. In secret. Right after my appointment. None of it made sense, but Henry's voice left no room for discussion. "Please," he added, a little firmer now, "don't spoil a good day with silly questions. You're healthy. That's what matters." Silly questions. The words stayed with me long after the car started moving again. Henry had always been honest with me. I wanted to believe him. So I told myself he was right. I told myself love meant trust. I nodded and let the subject drop, even though my chest felt tight. The days that followed did not bring relief. The tiredness stayed. Some mornings it was worse. My head felt heavy, my body slow, like I was moving through water. At work, I tried to smile and act normal, but one afternoon the room suddenly spun. My vision went dark for a second, and my head hit the desk. Mrs. Darcy rushed over immediately. "Emily, this keeps happening," she said gently. "You really should see another doctor." "I already did," I replied weakly. "He said I was fine." She frowned. "Perfectly healthy people don't almost faint at work. Please, get a second opinion." That night, I told Henry what had happened. He wrapped his arms around me, his voice full of concern. "You're just exhausted," he said. "The doctor already told you. You need rest. Maybe take a few days off." Not once did he suggest seeing someone else. That was when the doubt stopped being small. It became heavy. A few days later, Henry was in the shower. His phone buzzed on the table. I had never looked at his messages before, but this time my hand moved on its own. The screen lit up with a short message from a contact saved as Dr. Milton. "The next payment is due next week. Please don't be late." My heart dropped. Payment. Not a loan. Not help. A transaction. And in that moment, every loving word Henry had spoken felt like a mask hiding something far more dangerous. The next morning, I made a decision without telling Henry. I told him I was going to work, kissed him on the cheek, and walked out of the house with a smile that felt heavy on my face. Instead of going to my office, I took a bus to a women's clinic in the next town. My hands shook the entire ride. I was afraid of two possible answers. Either something was truly wrong with me, or nothing was wrong at all, and that would mean I was losing my mind. The clinic was nothing like Dr. Milton's office. It wasn't elegant or expensive. The chairs were simple, the walls plain, and the air smelled faintly of disinfectant. It felt real. The doctor I met was named Dr. Lauren. She was calm, direct, and looked at me with eyes that actually seemed to see me. She asked careful questions and didn't interrupt when I spoke. For the first time in months, I told the whole truth about my exhaustion, the dizziness, the headaches, and the strange moments when the world felt far away. Dr. Lauren listened quietly, then said, "We're going to run several tests. I don't want to guess." Her voice was steady, not dramatic, but serious enough to make my stomach tighten. The tests took hours. Blood work, scans, things I didn't fully understand. I went home afterward pretending everything was normal. Henry cooked dinner and told me I looked better already. I smiled and nodded, but inside I felt like I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't see. 3 days later, I returned to the clinic for the results. Dr. Lauren didn't smile when I walked in. She asked me to sit down. My heart began to race. "Emily," she said gently, "you are not healthy. You have a neurological condition affecting your brain. That's why you've been so tired, dizzy, and weak." The room felt suddenly very small. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't lazy. I wasn't broken in my mind. She continued, "The illness is serious, but treatable. With medication and monitoring, you can live a normal life. However, this didn't start recently. Based on the tests, you've had this condition for at least a year." A year. My breath caught. Why didn't my other doctor see this? I asked. When I told her about Dr. Milton, about the envelope, about my husband's payments, her face changed. "That is illegal," she said firmly. "A doctor lying about a diagnosis for money is a crime. And your husband allowing this put your life at risk." Her words cut deeper than the diagnosis itself. As I sat there, one truth became painfully clear. The greatest betrayal did not come from a stranger in a white coat. It came from the man who promised to protect me. I went home that evening with the test results folded neatly in my bag. My hands were steady, but my chest felt hollow, as if something inside me had already broken and gone quiet. Henry was in the kitchen when I walked in, humming softly as he prepared dinner, the picture of a caring husband. He looked up and smiled. "You're home early. How was work?" I didn't answer. I walked to the table, took the papers out, and placed them in front of him without a word. His smile faded the moment he saw the clinic's logo. He picked up the pages, scanned the first line, then the second. The color drained from his face. His fingers tightened around the paper. "Emily," he whispered, "I can explain." "Then explain," I said calmly. My voice didn't shake. That scared him more than anger would have. He sat down heavily, buried his face in his hands, and began to cry. Not quiet tears, but deep, broken sobs. "I was terrified," he said between breaths. "When you started getting tired, when you said your head hurt, I knew the signs. My mother had the same illness. I watched her fade away slowly. Hospitals, medicines, pain. I couldn't go through that again. I couldn't lose you." "So you paid a doctor to lie to me?" I asked. "I thought if we didn't name it, it wouldn't become real," he said desperately. "If we pretended everything was fine, maybe it would be. I just wanted more time with you. I wanted us to be normal." I stared at him, trying to recognize the man I married. "You watched me get weaker," I said. "You watched me doubt myself. You let me believe I was imagining it." He nodded, crying harder. "I was scared. I know it was wrong, but I didn't know what else to do." And in that moment, something inside me became very clear. He didn't choose love. He chose fear. He chose his comfort over my life. "That is not love," I said quietly. "Love does not lie. Love doesn't hide the truth to protect itself. Love faces fear together." I stood up and walked to the bedroom. I packed a small bag, slowly, carefully. Henry followed me, begging, apologizing, promising anything. But trust, once shattered, doesn't return with words. "I'm not leaving because I hate you," I said at the door. "I'm leaving because I respect myself." I walked out without slamming the door. Not in anger. In clarity. I stayed with Mrs. Darcy that night. She didn't ask many questions when she opened the door and saw my bag. She just pulled me into a quiet hug and said, "You're safe here." Her spare room was small, but it felt like air after months of suffocation. For the first time in a long while, I slept deeply, not because I was healthy, but because I was finally facing the truth. Treatment began the following week. The medicines made me tired, sometimes nauseous, sometimes scared. There were days when my hands shook and mornings when I didn't want to get out of bed. But there was something new inside me, hope. Dr. Lauren spoke to me honestly, explaining every step, every risk, every possibility. I wasn't protected by lies anymore. I was protected by knowledge. I filed for divorce soon after. Signing the papers hurt more than I expected. Henry had not been cruel in the way villains are cruel. He had loved me in a broken, fearful way. But love that steals your right to the truth is not love you can survive. Letting go of my marriage felt like a death, but staying would have been a slower one. During treatment, I thought often about fear. How it hides behind good intentions. How it dresses itself as protection. Henry didn't want to hurt me, but he wanted to protect himself more. And sometimes, the most dangerous betrayals are not born from hatred, but from fear that refuses to be faced. Weeks passed. My strength returned slowly. I learned to listen to my body instead of doubting it. I learned to ask questions, even when the answers scared me. Mrs. Darcy became family in a way I never expected, cooking soups, driving me to appointments, reminding me that trust can exist without control. One evening, as I sat by the window watching the city lights come on, I realized something important. I wasn't brave because I left. I was brave because I chose life over comfort, truth over illusion, myself over fear. Love, real love, does not demand silence. It does not ask you to disappear so someone else can feel safe. I don't know what the future holds. Recovery is not a straight line. But I wake up each morning knowing that my life is mine again, and that is enough. If this story made you reflect on love, trust, and courage, stay with us for more emotional English stories.